I'm Mark Seifter,
And I'm Linda Zeiss Palmer.
and this is Arcane Mark.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to GM Tools Alignment,
Welcome!
the particularly uncontentious topic of alignment.
Yes, everyone just agrees about alignment. It's very simple and easy in your game. So, before we get started by talking about alignment, let's quickly talk about. Quickly define it, because some people are watching the episode may not know what alignment is. You probably do if you're playing Pathfinder or Dungeons and Dragons or other games that have it, but alignment is an indicator of your character's morality and personality that typically is described based on two axes of alignment: good versus evil, where you can also be neutral in between those two extremes, and lawful versus chaotic, the much less easily understandable one, where you can also be neutral in between those two things.
So, in Pathfinder, how are these axes defined?
All right. So, um, good and evil are very loaded terms that everyone thinks they know the definition of, and
Because I think that's very important for any
chaotic and
discussion of
lawful
alignment.
are also terms that most people don't think they know the definition of, but if they try to figure it out, they're like, oh, lawful means I follow every law, and chaotic means I randomly roll a die to decide what I'm doing. And the alignments in Pathfinder 2nd Edition are a little more complicated than that. So, specifically, if the alignment axis of good and evil, you're good if you consider the happiness of others above your own and work selflessly to assist them. Even people who aren't just your friends and family, but just like some random person on the road. Good characters value protecting others from harm, even if doing so puts themselves in danger. You're evil if you're willing to victimize others for your own selfish gain, and possibly even more so if you enjoy inflicting harm. But even if you don't, and you're like, well, inflicting harm is very crass, but it will give me more money to do so, so of course I will, then you're still evil. If your character falls somewhere in the middle, for instance, oh yeah, you know, you're going to help out your friends and family, but other people should just figure it out. You're not going to stick your neck out for them. If
And-
it's easy, you'll help them. Just like, sure, if you can press a button in front of you that gives 100 gold pieces to every person in the village except you, or not press it, and you're neutral, you're probably going to press the button. But you're not going to go out on a limb for them.
So generally, the assumption then would be that most characters in the game world are going to fall on the neutral aspect of that axis, as opposed to fully qualifying as good or evil from the alignment perspective.
It's most likely that a lot of typical people are going
But
to are going to be
PCs
there.
yeah.
Maybe more neutral. I mean, evil
Yeah.
also. There's probably a lot of people in the fantasy world who are willing to victimize others for their
Yeah,
other game.
but
But
I'm saying
good
that,
is
like-
probably a little less
Yeah.
common.
But also, like, if you're just considering, like, the random people that you're going to find in a town, as opposed to I find that the PCs, the movers and shakers of the world, are more likely to be people who are going to be more extreme in these ways.
Yep. PCs are always larger than life.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's talk about law and chaos, because if you just look at it and you're like, oh, laws follow all the laws and chaos is random and therefore I roll a die, then you're gonna get it off. In particular, actually, rolling a die, having a character who says, wait, before I decide I must roll this die, and depending on what it is, in character, on a 1, I will kill you, and on a 2, I'll give you all my money. They're actually extremely lawful, not chaotic. So, a character has a lawful alignment if they value consistency, stability, and predictability over flexibility. Lawful characters are the ones who they have a schedule, they have like a life plan of exactly what they're going to do. They organize everything, and you know, their scrolls and their wands are all organized, and they have things planned out in advance so that they know how things are going to apply, and so that consistency can help out. So this might mean that you follow the laws In fact, you probably do. And if you don't like the laws where you live, you probably move to a place that has laws that fit your idea of consistency. But that doesn't mean that if you come into some strange new city where all the laws make no sense to you, that your character has to be the one who insists that everyone follows those laws.
Yeah, Cheddar Master said law and chaos are named misleadingly. Order is such a better name than law. Yeah, I tend to think of it more as like order versus spontaneity.
Yes. So, whether that's following a set of laws, adhering to a code of honor, just basically if you're a lawful character, you believe that having things codified is going to just make things better overall than just improvising everything. Even if sometimes it's not gonna necessarily, if you're not level neutral, if you're level good, you might be like, well, sometimes we should make exceptions. But at least this lawful code, having it out there so that we know generally how to deal with things is better than not. And lawful evil is like, oh, well, and of course I will find a way to twist it to my own ends. Whereas lawful neutral is like, no, we're gonna have it because we want it to be as fair as possible, and then we'll follow it.
Yeah. And I find that, alignment, of course, is a drastic oversimplification.
Oh, well, yeah.
So, and I think that's part of why I feel that a lot of characters may tend more toward the neutral, because in a lot of cases you'll be like, well, you're going to have a character that's going to be selfish and put themselves out on the line in some cases, but then in other cases, not so much.
That's right.
Or you're going to have a character who really values order and stability in certain areas of their life, but also has a strong creativity and passion that drives them.
That's right.
So,
because chaotic alignment is about creativity, flexibility, spontaneity over consistency. It's fine if you're not consistent from time to time, because you can deal with real world situations that are way more complicated than you can plan for in advance, by just, having a good ability to make judgment calls on the spot. That doesn't mean they're random. In fact, a chaotic character very rarely makes it that choice completely at random, because that's pretty lawful. They make it based on the merits of the current situation, and they want to be free to do so completely. Chaotic characters believe that lawful characters are too inflexible to judge the situation by its own merits or take advantage of opportunities that come their way. And lawful characters believe chaotic characters are irresponsible and flighty. And most characters are somewhere in the middle between those two, like Linda said. They usually obey the laws of the places they're in or some kind of code of conduct, but they'll bend it when something is obviously funky, or they just are like, this is dumb right now. I'm not going to do it. And most characters are like that.
Yeah.
And of course, this is way an oversimplification for real life in both of these axes.
So, if you have so what are some of the tips we can talk about for determining what the alignment, let's say you have a character and you want to figure out what their alignment is. I really, unless I have a very strong alignment themed, a strong idea of a character's alignment when I start a character, I like to start my characters at true neutral on both axes, and then just play them and see how they develop, and then set their alignment there. I generally prefer the descriptive model of alignment, where alignment can change and it describes sort of what the character's tendencies are as a whole, as opposed to saying, so like if I'm playing a character and that character is lawful good, but I've been starting to feel that character is not so much going to be caring about the certain rules and is becoming more spontaneous in the way that they see things. I'm not going to tell myself, oh, well, this means that I'm playing the character wrong. I have to stop playing the character this way. I'm going to play it differently. I'd rather say, oh, that means that this character is changing, because having a dynamic and changing character is always
see the character growth episode for more about those changing characters. It looks like Jess says freedom of individual choice is a good way to frame the chaotic alignment. Individual freedoms are very strongly valued by chaotic people. And to some extent, yes, especially chaotic good. That's why the Liberator is even more extreme in that. You can't take away someone's right to choose, even if you completely disagree with what they're doing, unless one of your tenets actually stops you and makes you do it. But in many cases, when you're not chaotic good, you might not necessarily care that everybody else gets a freedom of individual choice. You want the flexibility to be able to decide on the fly for yourself, or maybe your family and friends, or you don't want to be boxed in from those choices, but I'd say it's probably only the chaotic good that is definitely like that. I disagree with what you're saying, but I respect your freedom to express that. Um,
Yeah, there's a point here. One thing that the mental community doesn't like is when folks hide behind it, like people picking chaotic neutral just to be selfish and general act neutral evil.
oh
This is
yeah,
really important.
the chaotic neutral.
Yeah.
I'm totally not evil. It's just,
So either for chaotic neutral PCs or for evil PCs, those are where you're going to see it most commonly. But alignment, or even like you might have a very lawful PC who's like, oh well, this is the way that I play my character, and the character is always going to do this thing, so therefore that's how it's going to be. That alignment is definitely something that can be used as this is what my character would do, and therefore I'm not going to compromise. And ultimately, it's a game about having a good time together. So if you feel that your character would do something that is going to negatively impact the fun of everybody else, then see if you can think of another way to have them react. And that can include talking to the rest of the players at the table, being like, guys, I kind of feel like my character would do this, but that doesn't seem like it's very fun. Can you help me come up with something else that fits my character that they could do in this situation?
Yep.
Or you can have the time when the character is like, the character might say that they want to do something, but then they get overruled, and then they grumble about it or whatever.
Yep. And I do want to make it clear that absolutely you can play a chaotic character of any alignment who says everybody can pick. You could play a chaotic evil character, like some people in the chat were saying that it's like everybody can pick, but only so far as that they can push their own weight around and that they're strong. And beyond that, nobody will listen to them because everyone else is going to do that chaotic evil, throw them into the pool with the piranhas. It's just not necessarily like a requirement for a chaotic character except for chaotic good. And of course, even then, as Rico pointed out, taking it to an extreme, you may go past the good part of chaotic good.
Yeah.
Where you say, oh no, everybody can pick to do whatever they want, including these really evil things. And I'm not going to stop them because it's their choice. So, it as we can see.
Well, I mean, it's sort of like even with the Liberator, it's like the Liberator doesn't have to protect someone's freedom to be a slaver.
That's because of the fact that tenet is below the tenets. I put that tenet in the place where it is specifically to prevent that.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah. Anytime you try to condense someone down into just certain like labels, which alignment does, you're going to lose massive amounts of nuance about the person. And I mean, to give another example where law and chaos sort of come in, if we want to look at every slightly scientific person's favorite pseudoscientific sounding horoscope, the Myers-Briggs test. They have one of their categories. This is a test that says, oh, you're an extrovert or you're an introvert, or you're thinking or feeling, you're intuitive or sensing, you're judgmental or perceptive.
Yeah.
And judgmental and perceptive are actually fairly close to the law and chaos alignments. Because judgmental is always asking you questions about, oh, did you plan out your schedule? Or just, do something that you feel like it? And how organized is your space? But when I take that test, my space is organized completely in a way that only makes sense to me. It's random. Things are just where my hand needs to go to pick them up in a particular frame of mind. And anyone else who looks at it thinks it's just all completely scattered around. But when it comes to timing and scheduling, I am extremely meticulous in that. So, of course, they put me right near the break point, and then they just decide, oh, well, on the tie break, we're breaking the tie for this one. And then they've given me an entire label that is really just shows that entire category doesn't work for me, because it's really two subcategories of questions, one that's about your space and one that's about your time, which I answer 100% of the ones about the space in the exact opposite way as 100% of the ones about the time, and it makes it look like I'm just sort of in the middle for everything.
And Kisuna says, ever notice the tests seem to categorize neutral as having conflicting alignment tropes rather than balanced? Yeah, definitely. The idea that it's like, oh well, you have to be extreme in both ways.
And to be fair, I am extreme in both ways for that. If we want to use the Myers-Briggs there for law and chaos, I answer entirely one way in one situation, entirely one way in the other, but they're absolutely, you lose all nuance between that and someone who is like Dustin said, balanced out. And just like, it's kind of just not a big deal, and I will answer differently at any given time.
So I know that one of is the term tendencies for alignment something that was like a 3-5 thing, or where does that come
That's sort of like the tendencies is definitely something that even was more used in 2nd edition Dungeons and Dragons, where there were also a great wheel with planes that were like, this is the chaotic good with neutral with good tendencies plane that was in between the chaotic good plane and the neutral good plane.
Because I know that that's something that our group certainly talks about, where it's like, oh yeah, this person's neutral, but they tend more toward good, or things like that, as a way to describe things a little more of like how much are they, how extremely does someone follow this particular beliefs of an alignment, or where are they sort of leaning towards, and I do find that useful to give a little more nuance.
That's right. So those are some of the basics of alignment. Before we go deep into using alignment, I will just point out, for fairness' sake, that there may be people who just don't like it. For some of the reasons we said, that it's an oversimplification, it's putting a label on people, etc. And the Game Mastery Guide has you covered if you're one of those people. There's a section on variants for alignment that can help you if you want to make minor changes, where maybe only like demons and angels have an alignment, and champions and clerics, but most people just don't have one. Incremental alignment on a sliding scale, like Nicole was talking about in the chat, where you just can go from fully lawful to somewhat lawful to somewhat neutral between law and chaotic and so on. There's also big changes like removing alignment entirely from the game, replacing it with moral intentions, where you just sort of have some statements that you put in orders, like the tenets for a champion, like, I will never let my companions down, I will avenge my family. And you can also pick loyalties instead, like a loyalty to your hometown, and you put them in order roughly based on which ones you think are stronger, but you can just change them based on what you find out is actually stronger when they come into conflict. It can add a lot of interesting conflict without an alignment. And then there's some rules in there to help you deal with the fact that you may have removed or completely changed alignment with align damage, detection, and traits. So, but we're going to spend most of the rest of this episode, or maybe all of the rest of this episode, assuming that you did not want to remove alignment, and we're going to be talking about alignment as it appears in Pathfinder. Alright, so we've got the basics out of and the variants out of the way. So shall we address the elephant in the room that we sort of made lots of little jokes about when we said, oh, this is going to be a completely non-contentious episode, which is that alignment is one of the most discussed and debated topics in online, or sometimes in person, but usually more online, for Pathfinder, for Dungeons and Dragons, really in a lot of places, because with the labels, especially with two of them being good and evil, you've got some sort of almost identity politics of the alignments going on between people in the real world who have different views of what are good and evil.
So if you as the GM say that a particular act is good, that the PCs you're taking is good or evil, and one of your players has a very different philosophy on things, who would label that action the opposite, then it could feel to them that you are placing a judgment on their values, on their morality, and it can create some uncomfortable situations.
That's right. I mean, this literally happened in a game that I was running, that Linda was in. We had a player who is a strict utilitarian, and so was his character. a bard who at one point sold all of the souls of all of the elves in the world to Dagon for information that he could use to defeat his enemy, a half celestial BBEG who wanted to transmigrate all of the souls of everyone in the world to a world that was connected to the celestial realms instead of the current world, which was really on the down and was connected to hell and the abyss in two different ways, and just everything was bad. But the Bards player said that because of the fact that it prevented everyone from dying and having their souls transmigrated, that almost any act would not only be justifiable but also a good act based on his utilitarian principles. And so when he was, not only did he do that, but he also like made deals with the demons who were like, we corrupted this world and that took a lot of our effort. We don't want this whole transmigration to another world that's not corrupted. We want this corrupted world. We will back you up. Where he summoned demons into the world and let them do whatever they wanted in their spare time as long as they crafted magic items for him and more. And so eventually I and all of the rest of the party decided that this character was evil. But the player was not happy because based on his utilitarian point of view, the character was, as he said, the most good aligned character that he had ever played, being willing to make like some of these tough decisions that other people would have moral cowardice not to do. So, if you think that this sounds like too extreme and that this character was obviously evil, well, the rest of our group did, but you can still have someone who says, no, my philosophy, that character should have been good.
Metallic Mutant, that is what we ended up going more toward, and
and by that for you two people.
I'm going to I'm about to clarify here, and that being to talk about that we're talking about these based on the cosmology of this particular world and how this world judges good versus evil, and it's like, well, making deals with demons and things like that is an evil act because demons are evil and things like that. So we did go more into that because like obviously we weren't interested in getting into a huge philosophical debate.
Yes, but that's what we said, and it was okay, and it did not break down. Also, looks like we have some people here who vibe with utilitarians, but for this, and I can vibe with utilitarians sometimes too, but this player was a very strict utilitarian, and so and that was their point of view. And so, like, we're not going to negate and be like, well, not all utilitarians would agree with that. That's not a fair way to continue that discussion. So we just said, in this world, the definitions of good and evil are such that your character is evil. And let's see, Jess points out that dropping real-world perspective into a game where your real-world perspective makes assumptions like maybe souls don't exist and maybe demons don't exist, it's very rough to transplant the view into a world where those assumptions of reality are untrue. That is a very good point.
When you have
that is something I kind of started.
I
started with him a little bit about like, well, the soul being sent to this evil demon is kind of different because it's an immortal concept versus the lives of these people who are going to be transmigrated into the other world. But that didn't seem to be going very good place very fast. So talking about, well, that's how good and evil are defined here kind of worked. And hey, it led me to some concepts that led to creating another world down the line where I played with that alignment, and I think that's a worthwhile thing to discuss in this alignment episode.
Yeah.
So I created a homebrew world where, roughly, if you're a mortal, whatever, you get alignments that are based on something similar to the Pathfinder alignments. But when it comes to the true strong concept of good, evil, law, and chaos in this homebrew setting, for which the angels and the demons all have, you are good, like the good subtype from 3.5 and Pathfinder 1, which is what the system I built the world in. You get that good subtype, outsider, if you are following a particular set of laws that like the good creator goddess created a long time ago. And if you're in rebellion against those, you were evil. You know, you had the evil subtype from Pathfinder First Edition, and our demon. And it doesn't matter what any of the things we said so far in this episode. That meant that you could be a horrific jerk to everyone, but you followed and murderer. But if you followed those rules,
you could be someone. You could be someone who
as an angel.
You could be someone who follows those religious laws and goes around murdering people you think might be witches and their families and doing all sorts of awful things.
Yep.
And you would still be capital G good. Or you can be the most selfless person ever who doesn't think that those laws are fair and wants to make better lives for people, and you would be capital E evil.
To give examples, 2 of the archangels that fell and became archdemons, one of them was the angel of rulership and pride, who pride comes before the fall, but one of them was the angel of redemption, who felt that the new rules that they were making would make it impossible to redeem others. And that for compassion to mortal kind, it was impossible to follow them. And hey, guys, maybe we can stop and readjust, and we don't need to draw battle lines, which was considered to be on the line of not following it, and imprisoned for eternity. So that was good and evil, because I was just playing with it. And it's that's who defines good and evil, was the people who made those laws. And then law and chaos were defined as law is trying to keep reality together. And chaos is trying to annihilate reality. Is a being that is of anti-existence, that was created by accident a long time ago, that is just trying to negate reality so that it ends. And that's just what those alignments cosmically meant in that setting. And so it's very different from what you're used to, even if you use Pathfinder, and that makes it in the setting kind of interesting in a way that good and evil people, like an angel and a demon, might work together in that setting to stop the chaotic creatures in that setting from destroying reality, because neither one of them wants that. So there are different ways to play around with alignment, and they absolutely, you absolutely can. And that's one of the reasons why it's very important to be upfront with someone if their real world views on good and evil are not grokking with the real world, with the views in the game, is that this is how it's defined in the game. That doesn't mean that you are an evil person in real life because of the fact that you have a different point of view than what the game defines good and evil.
Yeah. Let's see. Pathfinder has does your soul bulwark the seal or weaken it? Capital letter A alignment questions, right? I'm not actually sure what you mean by that, Kitsune.
And there's some more talking about whether the eternal soul's value would be more important than a living creature in a setting with souls. Wither King points out not caring about what the demons he let go seems neglectful, and you can't be accountable for what others do. It's 99% likely the demons were going to do some really bad things. As it turns out, yes, he did make them agree that they wouldn't in any way interfere with the people who were trying to save the world. Linda's character had decided that this world was bad and to just kind of let it go. And so, and also Linda's character had angered a demon lord. So one of the demons who he summoned in was one of the main minions of that demon lord, who tried to grab Linda's character's family and take them to the demon lord, which Linda's character wound up triple crossing everyone and joining up with the rest of the party and killing that demon. And so the Bard's player came back fuming to the Glabrezu he had made the deal with, and was like, "How dare you?" And the Glabrezu was like, "Hold on. First of all, we're demons. We don't even have to follow anything that we agreed to do. Second of all, we followed everything that we agreed to do. Also, I don't like the demon lord that crafter worked for. Malcontet is weird. She does weird stuff, but she listened to you. She wasn't messing with anybody who was going to try to save the world. She crafted you items during 8 hours a day and did whatever she wanted with the rest of the time." The Bard player says, "Yes, but then she got caught, and now she's not crafting me items. And she promised to craft me items." That's why I'm mad. You misunderstand me. You thought I was angry that she was trying to, like, take the souls of the rest of the family of this person who wasn't helping us.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. Yeah.
And the Glabrezu thought that that was a very
The
reasonable
Glabrezu
point.
was like, you make a really good point, and we will try to not fail in the future at the random evil things we do in the sideline.
The Bard
Wither
was
Kick says
hilarious.
the Bard is hilarious. Honestly, like, the Bard's player is a great role player and a great strategist of things to do, and it was just really, really was part of what made the campaign. It was a chaotic evil character who absolutely was the glue of the party in some ways, and really worked well together with the party.
Yep. That party where we had at one point chaotic evil, lawful good,
And a
and,
paladin.
chaotic, and a paladin in the same party at the same
Also,
time.
chaotic good exalted who stole like
Yeah.
1,000,000 gold pieces from the party.
Yeah, he stole the entire party treasury so that he could buy back the elven souls. That he could,
Yes.
So he could
He
hire,
could hire
master
a
thief.
master thief to go into the abyss and steal back the elven souls that were sold to Dagon. Then also, the really weird thing was that the character was supposed to be really wise, and he wound up getting lucky and being wise and good because, like, he did so well in his organization that the organization's leader is like, I will give you anything you want. You are the employee of the decade. So he's like, well, you know, I'm a psychic character, so I kind of would like it if you use psychic surgery to give me permanent extra psychic spells. Right? That's pretty good. And they were like, oh, I'd have to come up there in person, and we're very secretive, but we'll do that because you're the best. So then this chaotic and extremely good character was talking to this sketchy, weird aberration guy that even the BBEG was like, I'm kind of spooked by this guy. I don't know if I'm going to listen to him. And that guy was like, you know, the organization you work for is secretly evil, and your leader is too. You should kill him when he comes up and gives you those free spells and reveals himself. And so without checking or vetting it in any way, he decided, oh yeah, okay. And he did. But the thing is, that really sketchy guy was right, and his leader was secretly evil, and so he wound up being good, but I was like, you really maybe should have, like, checked on that. Also, there's something a little bit about the fact that he let the guy give him the spells
Yes.
that
and
cost
then-
XP back in 3.5 first, and then killed him.
Yep. But I think that there's a good point to be made here that, like, this worked with things like with vastly opposed alignments and things like stealing 1,000,000 gold from the party treasury.
And I don't mean like
Because-
1,000,000 gold as in like, oh, it was a
No,
lot.
like literally 1,000,000 gold
The
pieces.
price tag on this heist was 1,000,000 gold.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, it's very much the case that this only worked because we, as players, were cool with this.
Mm-hmm.
And we knew that we knew each other, and we weren't going to be upsetting each other with that. And I think that, particularly with the sort of good PCs and evil PCs in the same party, you can be more likely to run into issues if people are playing the alignments in a way that's not going to play together as well. So I think it might be good to talk about evil PCs in groups.
Right. So, evil PCs in groups is one of the most common topics for alignment debates. The other one is paladins in groups, and the third one is paladins in groups with evil PCs.
Yeah.
So,
So let's talk about the evil PCs.
evil
First.
PCs can sometimes work, and they're sometimes they're not right for certain people. Like for me, I play enough evil characters as a GM, and I enjoy. I very much enjoy certain kinds of evil NPCs as the GM, but when I'm a player and like this is my character, I tend to not. I tend to even get skeeved a little bit sometimes by what my neutral characters will agree to do. And I play very heroic characters. But some people want to play an evil character who's part of a group. And you can. And it can be a very successful group, depending on how you do it. The chaotic evil character we mentioned. But more typically, the way that an evil character works is that it's an evil character who is to their utmost supportive of their party and the other people in it.
Because remember that being kind and helpful to your friends and family doesn't mean that you're good. You can have an evil character who is helpful to their friends and family and just screw everyone else.
Yep. Absolutely. And that can be a very effective kind of evil character for a party. At one point, because of the fact that I just don't like evil characters, but playing them as a player, I wanted to expand my horizons. So I decided to create the most support chaotic evil cleric that I could possibly play that fit into things that I was okay with for the most part. It was still pretty evil. So but they were actually a chaotic evil cleric of chaotic evil deity of temptation. So the way that her philosophy works is that killing is absolutely forbidden, except for to chaotic evil people. There's a reason for that, though. She believes that everyone has the opportunity to become chaotic evil, which she sees actually very similarly to a way that Jess really, really earlier in the episode described chaotic evil. She sees chaotic evil as the ultimate beauty of removing the lies of good and law that people just use to cloud up what they actually want. And it's just people going for it and believing in themselves and just striving for their dreams. So she pretends to be a cleric of like a chaotic good goddess of love or whatever, and people come over and say like and ask her for advice, and she just wants to help people out, right? So it's like oh, you know, I really like this guy. It's like, oh, you should ask him out. Well, he's with this other guy right now. Oh, that's too bad that he's in the way, right?
What could you
do about that, right? Just think about it. And she doesn't like explicitly ever say like, oh, you should kill this other person. She just lets them come to whatever decision that they are going to come to. But here's the thing. She believes that demons are that expression of the perfect chaotic evil, and that if your soul goes to an afterlife, kind of like we were talking about souls earlier on, and becomes lawful evil. This, I think, was in a setting in D&D where the devils fought against the demons. Like, that's a problem. They become an angel. That's a problem. They should all become demons. So you can't kill someone when they haven't become chaotic evil yet. So she was basically a pacifist who just wanted to help people get what they wanted and just to ignore things that were standing in their way, such as their morality code. But like, if what they wanted was legitimately not that evil yet, as long as they are never taking anything else into account except for just striving for their dreams. So that was my one chaotic evil character, and you can make evil characters like that are meant to fit in with the party. And sometimes you can have characters that just become evil over time, and they can wind up being some of the best evil characters to fit in the party because they already have this deep connection to the rest of the party.
Like Kagi and Jade Regent.
Yeah, he was a lawful neutral, but then went over the edge. Ninja, who you can find out more about in Mark's Adventures, Jade Regent, he was still so loyal to Ameko at all times, and he knew she was not the same alignment as him, but he didn't care. He felt that she was right for Minkai and that everything was going to be great with her, and that didn't matter what it takes to put her on the throne. And so that's a great example, Linda.
And so you can have these characters who, the lawful evil character who will do the things that other PCs might not be willing to do in order to further the PC's objective.
That's right.
As long as, I'd say for that, still make sure that the things that they're doing aren't things that are making the other players uncomfortable. Even if they're things that, they can be things that other PCs would disagree with, as long as the other players are cool with it.
That's an important thing with evil characters. Or here's another example of a character who became evil. Maybe one of like the most iconic characters of almost any of the campaigns I've ever run, and Linda probably knows who it is, even though she did not join any of my campaigns until years after this character. There's an elf character named Distant Moonshadow, who's a wizard, and he was basically the most incompetent wizard ever known. The party cleric was constantly snarking at him for always having exactly the wrong spells prepared for any given situation. He miscast spells that were far beyond his capability, insulted just the wrong people, and just basically made every possible wrong decision that you could ever make. When his father seemed to have died and he was trying to investigate it, he went to the sacred tree grove where elves' souls transmigrate to the afterlife and summon demons there to question them, for example. which wound up screwing up all the way that elves trying to be great. And that was like his big thing where he was like, this is so wrong, I must right this wrong, because he legitimately was trying to be good. And so like he had it as a major quest, and he wound up actually making a deal with an Archduke of Hell to try to get the souls back from the abyss of the elves that were taken there. But eventually, after multiple mess-ups and just all these things that were happening, and the fact that everyone assumed he was just horrifically evil, he realized something, which was that, wow, if I actually convinced them successfully that all of these horrible things I did were mistakes, they're going to think I'm like the worst person ever, which is true. But I'm actually kind of okay with them thinking I'm a really successful villain who was doing this all on purpose, more so than realizing how much I messed up. So I guess that means I am evil now, right? And I was like, yeah, I guess you are. And then he wound up being successful at being evil too, so it was pretty funny. So, like, characters who have this sudden dawning realization that while they're trying to do good all along, that really they're better as a villain than hero. He was still, like, completely loyal to the group for the most part, but he became an evil character in his own right at that point in time. Lord Warlord says sometimes the alignment chooses you. So that's evil characters, and making sure that you can try to run an evil character who's going to fit in with your group. And even if they don't become it over time, you can use Session 0 or something like that to establish strong connections between your evil character and the rest of the party. So let's talk next about characters who are not evil, and therefore don't bring in that baggage of, well, they may be so non-heroic that they don't fit the plotline. Let's bring in champions, or a paladin who may be perfect for the plotline, but the problem is that they are so ridiculous paragons of whatever that they feel like their code is also should be encroaching on everyone else.
And this isn't just about alignment. It's about any time that a character has a very strong code and belief system.
That's right. And champions are not the only time that this can happen. You can also have just someone with an anathema that other people might violate. So when it comes to playing a champion, you need to understand the fact that being a champion is about being an example that people want to follow. It's not about forcing people to do exactly what you want. Now, if they are actually harming innocents or doing something that your code says you can't let them harm innocents, you have to stop them, because your code... There are very few things in the Pathfinder 2nd Edition Champions Code that actually require the champion to curtail what's going on with their fellow adventurers, for sure. One of them is, like, if you have someone who... You just can't have someone who's in your party who's just going around murdering innocents. If you're a champion, a good champion.
Or like there was that old thing about like or meme rather about like the Oath Against Undead or a Paladin or Oath Against Fiends Paladin in First Edition. And somebody with an imp familiar or somebody who's like a necromancer or something like that.
So now we're bringing it into what if they come together at the same point in time, the evil one and the champion. So there actually is a possibility that you actually will violate your oath with that other character. At Session 0, you should probably try to not literally build characters that literally violate each other's oaths. And at an org play table, consider playing a pregen or bring a different character if you literally violate their oath.
Org play generally has a thing where it's like, if you're in a situation where you have a character and somebody else has a character and those two characters cannot coexist because they literally have to do the opposite thing, then like it doesn't count against your stuff for the purposes of like your character having consequences, because that was a completely unavoidable situation at that point. But whenever you can like have your pick characters to avoid
I would recommend just changing the character so you don't have to feel like, for me, I would feel like I would just want to forget that session ever happened where my character was not... Well, my character was tolerating an imp if I was an Oath Against Fiends and it violated my oath, even if yes, or play said that
Yeah.
I wasn't going to lose
Yeah.
my powers
No,
for it.
I'm saying that is allowed, but I would also definitely rather play another character or pre-gen than play in that sort of situation where it's like your character so much says that like your character has this list of rules with them, and it specifically says that the one thing they can't do is exactly what this requires.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
But it's also the same. It's also by the same token that like directly following what a scenario says, like you have to do this. This is like the mission for the scenario. Isn't going to cause issues with codes and things like that.
Right. So try to make sure your characters don't literally violate. But let's say they don't literally violate it, right? Let's say that you are a champion and there's an imp and you're not oath against fiends. That still is something that creates friction. So make sure that you want that friction. Team up with the other player to come up with some kind of idea about this. So maybe the idea is that your character, the champion, is the older sister. And the person who has the imp familiars is your younger brother, who, like, the imp is whispering in his ear, and the paladin is trying to, like, get him to not fall into traps slayed by hell. And so sort of like the paladin is the angel on her little brother's shoulder, and the imp is the devil, the literal devil, that is literally actually on his other shoulder. And so that the paladin is planning to play off the imp for role play, but not like use that as a thing of like, I hate you, brother, be gone, because that's just gonna push him into the fiery embrace of hell, but instead to accept him, but try to convince him not to go
And
over to the dark
likewise,
side.
the imp knows that it wouldn't be a good idea to try to murder the paladin, because even if they did manage to succeed, then that could easily trace back to them and ruin their plans to corrupt the younger brother.
And this works if the players agree to that, and the players are like, oh yeah, I like that idea. And you know, ultimately, players. A lot of players who want to do something like this, it's for the feel of their characters. Sometimes it's for, like, sort of the attention of, look at me and I'm doing this super evil thing. And you actually will wind up getting, in some ways, you're guaranteed more attention if you work together with the player of the champion and have this situation where your sister, the player of your sister is going to constantly be trying to pull you on the straight and narrow, and you get guaranteed role play and spotlight from that.
Because the kind of spotlight that players get when they're playing sort of an antagonistic or adversarial position where they're like, oh, well, you know, my character's going to do this because that's just what my character would do. It's more like that other players are trying to work around them or avoid them, or the GM is trying to solve the problems that they create. Whereas if you're working as a part of the group, then everyone's going to want to engage with that, and you're going to have a lot more fun.
Yeah, exactly. So trying to find some kind of combination in that sense is a great concept. So, for example, you could have, if you talk about the classic, like, Cleric of Pharasma with Necromancer, maybe these two people are a Cleric of Pharasma and a Necromancer because we can use a similar conceit to the exact same one we used before, but they are siblings whose parents died. Or, you know, like in Fullmetal Alchemist, where it's like, oh no, their mother died and they tried this forbidden magic. But the different reactions was that one sibling became a Cleric of Pharasma. It's like, oh, I understand. And the other one is like, no, I will find a way to bring our mother back that is not an undead. I'm going to do it with necromancy. I don't care if it's forbidden.
Yeah.
And so the undead stuff is anathema to the Cleric of Pharasma, but they also don't want... They understand their brother's pain, and they don't want to... They don't want to push them away completely into the whole evil undead stuff.
So, like siblings or, you know, family members, close friends, members of a similar organization. Maybe they are... They could also be rivals in some way, or people who are pushed together to work towards some common goal, and while they might not agree with each other's philosophies, they both recognize that the other one is useful and think maybe they can convince the other one more over toward their philosophy.
Exactly.
One of the things we talked about in the character growth episode is how people who spend a lot of time with each other are going to influence each other's beliefs. And so that can be a really cool thing to play out at the gaming table.
For sure. Always approach it remembering, like we said in character growth, that if your goal is to play a realistic character, that means you can't just write some things on your sheet and then stick to those no matter what happens. You absolutely have to. Oh,
we just got
we
rated.
got rated for I think the first time. Hi everybody from
hi.
Avondale. Welcome. It's Raiders. We're talking right now about character growth when it comes to alignment or having characters with multiple alignments in the same group. Mm-hmm. So, let's see, what were we saying? We were saying that you don't want to just stick to the idea that, oh, my character sheet says this is exactly how my personality is, because real people change the way they act when they're around new people and when they're exposed to new ideas, especially when they come from friends or peers, or in this case, people that are fighting for their life alongside. So it makes sense to have your characters sort of work together in that way to sort of shift one way or the other. And oh wow, thanks for gifting subs.
Thanks for the gift subs.
Both GM Reckless and Trippy.
Scroll.
And so
sub only chat.
Having that idea that you're willing to possibly change based on other people around you and that you're flexible just makes it just a more satisfying and interesting experience, rather than setting up your mind ahead of time that says, you know what? No, this is what my character is, and I'm never going to change. Hype train!
The hype train has arrived at the station. Thank you for kicking that off, Numbat, with a 1,000-bit cheer.
Now we get to find out if I remembered to lower the hype train.
Threshold.
I think I did, yes. It was too hard before.
Thank you for the cheers, Trippy.
So, Linda, we talked...
And GM Reckless, Joe,
yes.
It looks like yours did not quite go through.
Linda, we talked before about having multiple very different alignments that were in the same party. That's a big one on alignment debates. What are some other ones that we have there?
Well, what if you having two people in the same party who have a different interpretation of the same alignment or philosophy?
Ooh.
Like, if you have two paladins of the same deity, and they both have very different ideas of how they're supposed to go about that.
So that can run into a problem. It can also lead to some great role-playing. There was one time that Linda and I were both playing Kyra, from the make-believe Order of Kyra, that were just all people who changed their name to Kyra and dressed up like Kyra and just acted like Kyra, and they were in the same group.
The Order of Kyra is an order that we invented for our home group and eventually the local Boston Lodge. That was basically GMs constantly brought in Kyra pre-gens to fill Pathfinder Society tables because they're clerics and they heal people and they're not going to be really stepping on people's toes. So there's always so many Kyras around them. We decided that there was an Order of the Kyras that was led by the original Saint Kyra, an 18th level cleric of Sarenrae who lives over in the Padishah Empire of Kalesh, and that that she has disciples who follow her order, who dresses her, and then they go out adventuring primarily when they are
level 1, 4, and 7, the same levels that she was.
The same levels that match with the great acts, the sort of 3 great acts of Saint Kyra. And when they do so, they traditionally wear the same equipment. And they wear the same equipment and gear and things like that as the original Saint Kyra did when she reached that level.
But we were adventuring in Rahadum.
Yes.
And so Linda's character was a more sort of lax and reformist Kyra, who changed her outfit to not look like Kyra, re-prepared spells to not prepare the cure spell. Actually, that was a big debate. Because in Pathfinder 1st Edition, the pre-generated character Kyra prepared cure spells in her spell slots. Now, for those of you who mostly played Pathfinder 2nd Edition, this is not the case, but in Pathfinder 1st Edition, you didn't have a divine font to get cast heal spells. Instead, you would prepare the spells you actually wanted to cast, and then you would be sort of forced to change them into healing spells throughout the day, which your class allowed you to do, and so therefore you would be pressured to do it. So it'd be like, oh, I want to cast this awesome divine power, oh, but I gotta change it into cure critical wounds. And so the pre-generated character just prepared them, which is just absolutely no reasonable person would do because of the fact that you could prepare something else and switch to it. It's strictly worse than not preparing it. My character, however, said that Kyra was teaching us a lesson, and the lesson is humility. Not to be so arrogant that we think we're going to cast these spells for ourselves, but to always not even leave ourselves the option, but to help others. Whereas Linda's character changed some of the prepared spells that were on the pre-gen to other spells each day after that were just more flexible, including not preparing the kind of meaningless cure spells. And we had theological debates about that and whether we could change our outfits and other things like that were some of the best role play in that adventure.
So I know that I think was more of it was a very silly and fun example.
But you can have less silly and fun examples.
They may disagree on fundamental tenets on what should be done, and I think that as with any debate between characters, making sure that it is respectful, at least out of character. You know, if you want your characters to be not so respectful to each other, but you and your fellow players are having a good time, that can be fun too.
I think that we were mostly respectful with the Kyras, but we each crossed the line of respect to the other Kyra a few times, but we were just having fun with it. But you can get into some seriously difficult situations. For example, in a Giant Slayer game that didn't last for very long, I played a druid who was trying to follow Torag's Paladin's code for the most part, other than, not being lawful. But I was trying to be neutral good, and that code is so evil, the one from Pathfinder 1st Edition. It is really evil. So I feel like if I played it now that I feel more confident in how evil it is, I would have serious problems with someone else in the party who was following the actual Torag's Paladin's code, which says that you should genocide anybody who could be a threat to your people, because otherwise they'll attack you later.
Yeah.
It's pretty evil. So, there can be, like, some serious debates or issues, and they might have an issue being like, you say you're following the Torag code, you're not really following the Torag code.
Hype chest!
Ooh, it's a treasure chest. Thanks, everybody. So, it's very important to, as people are saying in chat, to get sort of consent with someone when you're going to start debating with their characters, or do anything that's any kind of might be showing disrespect for them or something like that. And there's just a lot of the Pathfinder world is so sort of nuanced in some ways and has a lot of really interesting splits, so that you can easily wind up with some fun and interesting debates. But it can quickly get out of hand if one of the people doesn't want it or one person is a little too nasty. So be sure to make sure that everybody is having fun when you do something like that.
And these sorts of debates and conversations aren't just among the PCs, of course. Presenting NPCs that can engage with the PCs in an interesting way and challenge them is a lot of fun. And one of the nice things about it being an NPC that provides sort of that counterpoint or that interesting interaction is that it's a lot easier if an NPC kind of falls flat to just phase them out of the story.
That's right. We've definitely had situations where that happened. If you watch the Linda's Adventures Councils of Thieves series, there is there's an NPC in there who is a lawful good cleric of Iomedae who believes that tieflings are evil fiends. They are not people because they do not, in Pathfinder 1st Edition, Charm Person doesn't work on them. They are not humanoids. And that therefore Iomedae's teachings that all people should come together and work together don't apply. And my tiefling character did not really see eye to eye with that character.
Yes. So very much during the story it's interesting because I don't think that at least they didn't mention that I recall in the actual adventure path people thinking about like, okay, hey, how is this going to be perceived? But very much for my group, it became a narrative of sort of overcoming the influence of this person and this person's role became more like someone whose influence was to be overcome, and eventually they changed their mind.
My character had a lot of debates, and eventually she reached the conclusion that was like, you know what? I'm going to stop debating you, because clearly if I was right, the goddess Iomade would never be granting you spells, because what you're doing is so vile. So I must be wrong. And so then I changed my religion, because I was a follower of Iomade up until that point.
That's an interesting thing to think about too, though, with alignment and deities, and how much
because this guy's a cleric.
Yeah, how much sort of like as a GM in your setting, you would allow deities to sort of grant powers to and accept their followers doing things that are very different from what they espouse and from their alignment. I know that's something that's definitely changed in the migration from first edition to second edition, where there's been more of an analysis of, rather than just using a broad rule of which alignments are going to be okay for which deities, to say, okay, these are the alignments that are more consistent with these deities' tenets.
For a cleric.
Yeah.
For someone who's getting direct powers.
But if somebody's not getting direct powers from the deity, then, pretty much anything goes then. But the very fact that, people can have such different, even a cleric who is saying, this is how I follow the deity, they can have different alignments even in very different philosophies, and then they both still gain powers from the deity. I really do like that as an aspect of the world that shows that there's, it really isn't saying that there's any one right way to play a character, even one who has, I'm going to follow the tenets of this deity,
right?
As sort of a core concept.
Mm-hmm. So okay, we've got clashes among followers of even the same deity. That there's also one more that we should at least cover. The Pathfinder 2nd Edition, I worked really hard, and also with a lot of help from people that I workshop this with, to get around, which is, what about if the two people who don't agree about it are not two players, but are the two of the regular players, but are the GM and the player who is playing the character?
Mm-hmm.
So, like the classic Paladin code issues where the GM is like, oh, I think the Paladin falls, and the player's like, I don't think I fall. So Pathfinder 2nd Edition code with tenets that are that have different bullet points in order, and you always let the higher tenet override the lower tenet, so you don't get in a gotcha situation. It's definitely going to make it easier for you with that. But you still could wind up in a situation where, no, there weren't two tenets making you in a gotcha situation, like the old problem with categorical imperative, which is to basically follow the golden rule, do only what you would want other people to do, which says never ever lie. And then they're like, what about the inquiring murderer who says, hey, tell me where to find this victim so I can kill them? And then in the Kantian viewpoint, you'd be like, okay, because I never lie, there's where they are, go kill them. So similarly, you would have that problem in Pathfinder 1st Edition, where if an authority figure told you that you need to tell them truthfully, and you were forced to testify about where someone is, that so they can go kill them, you would have to respect the authority, and you would have to testify, and you couldn't lie.
I would say as a GM, when you're presenting these sorts of situations, it's totally okay to present sort of temptations and opportunities for the players to take the high road. But what you want to avoid is situations that feel like false choices or gotchas, where it's like they're presented with two choices, and if they pick one of these choices, then everything falls apart. Or they're presented with two choices, but they're hypothetically presented with two choices, but one choice is like really easy and is the assumed one, and that one is going to make your character fall, and then the other choice is like puts you in an impossible string of encounters where your characters are going to probably die. Or even if that's not what the case actually is, that the player has the perception that they don't have a fair shot at portraying their character.
And that's also why, like, there's even clarifications on some of the Paladin's code that you don't have to just throw your life away on a hopeless attempt to do something on certain pieces of the code. It was really like, and obviously, no matter what code you write is going to have issues. That's the whole point of like Isaac Asimov's Laws of Robotics, is how many fun stories you could write about how those laws, which seem pretty good, are not good enough to handle all sorts of situations. Similarly, I'm sure that the tenets and the codes for second edition are not going to be foolproof for you, but it should always be the case that you talk to your player about it too. Like, before you have them fall, you should probably tell them, no, I think if you do this, you're going to fall. I'll give you an example. I GM'd for the first champion who ever fell in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Ever. It was during the playtest. Ron Lundeen has the dubious honor of causing Sela, the iconic paladin, to fall from grace during a Pathfinder Society adventure called Bid for Alabastering. So, in that adventure, which I converted to Pathfinder 2nd Edition, there is a lawful neutral Aspis Consortium member. One of the only things that Ron knew about, and all the party knew about her, is that other than the fact that they did not want her to win the bid for this city, she is punctilious about following any bargains or agreements that she makes. She's not going to go back on you or betray you. Of course she's going to try to enrich herself. She's part of the Aspis Consortium. They're not a good group. But you can trust her when she makes a deal. So, the group had done so well, they were actually definitely going to win, but there was this one elf who really liked lawful neutralness and laws and access, and the group had not made good progress with him, and the Aspis person had come and even pulled him more out of their sway, as part of what happens in the game when you get too far with the other characters. And they then went to his party, which was literally on Axis. And so Ron goes up to him and says, you know, this Aspis person, you can't trust her. She's a traitor. She's going to go back on whatever she promised you for sure. She never keeps her word. And I said, okay, so Ron, I just want to make this clear, though, because the only thing you know about her is that she does always keep her word. So this is definitely a lie. And I don't think I see any of these other tenets on the code that are above this, so I think that you would fall from grace if you did this, right? And he looked at it, he's like, yeah, I think I would. Alright, I'm gonna do it. And I said, okay, I'm giving you a +4 circumstance bonus on this check, because no one could possibly believe that a paladin would lie and fall from grace over something like this, to just try to convince this guy on the plane of Axis, the plane of ultimate law. So he rolled a 2.
Then he spent
his hero point. And it was a 2 again. So obviously Iomedae did not want him to succeed from falling from grace on Axis. So the elf was horrified because he could tell it was a lie, and he's like, the Aspis told me Pathfinders have no scruples and will just make up whatever lie they want. I assumed she was exaggerating a little bit there. That they would even send a paladin to besmirch herself and fall from grace just to trying to lie to me and convince me there's no way I can work with the Pathfinder Society. And like then they had to play the elf had to play damage control with the lawful outsiders. Like, what has happened? The paladin fell from grace here. And Linda, who's playing Kyra, spent the rest of the session just trying to counsel Sela about like the fall from grace and try to help her
like trying to figure out what just
regain
happened
Iomedae's grace again.
Yeah.
So but the point was that in that one I didn't just say, okay, Ron, you lie. You fall from grace. I was like, Ron, look with me at the code. Like, from what I'm seeing, I'm pretty sure that this is going to cause you to fall, but I'm also willing to hear where you think that it doesn't. And then he looked at it, he's like, no, yeah, I'm going to fall, I guess.
Yeah.
I didn't think of that, but sure. I think he honestly wanted to just be the person who's in this story someday that I have told now multiple times, as Ular points out, that would be the first person who ever fell from grace in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. That was probably more important than not falling from grace in that case. But the point was, it was very respectful with everyone involved, and it was not a gotcha. We all just agreed, yeah, that's what's going to happen. All right. So we had differences of opinion about codes from player to player, player to GM. We had different players that have very different alignments, evil characters in your game. Paladins are people with a very pushy code in your game, even when there's not someone who's completely against them. What other hot alignment issues have we missed? Or is that most of them?
I think I think that's about it. I mean, I guess I would say one other thing, like when you're running when you're running a pre-published adventure, like for society play, that's set what the alignments are. But if you're running another adventure and you're looking at how a character's alignment is set, and you just really don't feel like that fits for your conception of alignment, you can totally change what alignment it says on their sheet.
Yep.
I've definitely seen that, like, especially in some of the earlier Pathfinder adventures where a lot of things were, shall we say, got neutral that seemed like really, really evil. Like, we like to joke sometimes in our Kingmaker group about like the Hodag, which was like a 5 intelligence creature that's just like,
it wants to crunch on your bones extra because of the pain, and it loves listening to your pain. It was not just eating you.
Yes.
I think it became neutral evil in 2nd edition.
Yeah, it did, but like. But don't feel like you're trapped. At GMs, don't feel like you're trapped by alignment either.
Also, Wyvern was another major one that our Kingmaker group joked about, and
we called that Wyvern neutral.
I pushed to get it changed to evil in 2nd edition, and when we saw the description of it, people agreed that the fact that this true neutral creature had things like, you can try to make a deal with it. However, these arrangements rarely last more than a few weeks before the wyvern's pride, malice, and insolence inspires it to flee or betray its allies. Only the truly cruel can cow a wyvern into servitude for an extended period, as most wyverns are so self-interested they go out of their way to avoid helping others. Those were just in there, and I was like, come on, let's change it to neutral evil, and we did. But I think there was also a meme of, like, characters who were made neutral so that protection from evil wouldn't work against their enchantment spells in Pathfinder 1st edition. There were definitely some cases also where I wanted to keep the character neutral because it was just better for the story.
Yeah.
But there were 1 or 2 things that I just had to adjust what they did to be like, no, they were really evil. Yeah. I think in War for the Crown there are a few cases where it was like, this is a really interesting story about a neutral character. Except then they do this thing that is way over a moral event horizon. So if I just kind of patch up this little bit of the thing that they did, then even allow it to have happened, but not in the same way.
Or how it to, like, you know, maybe they are allowed to for a different reason.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah.
So, like, there's a chaotic neutral character in a game that I ran in a published adventure who, like, he has this whole complicated thing where he went off and he got transformed into a fae. And then, because he failed at his quest, and then his wife and true love, like, came to find him and fought all the other fae and saved him from those fae, and he's chaotic neutral on the adventure. And so after that, when they were together, he was so mad about the fact that, like, a woman outshowed him that he strangled her to death in her sleep after she was tired from saving him from all of the fae. So, I kind of liked this story overall, and I wanted to be chaotic neutral, so I changed it to be, because he was, like, forced into servitude to these other fae, that, like, the Death Geas of being part of these fae forced him to kill her, like, more, like, with tears in his eyes, and, like, kind of mad with grief that he was fighting her, and he did, because she was weakened from killing everything else. And so, all the same things happened, but I felt I could keep the chaotic neutral alignment and have this tormented and conflicted character, whereas I think obviously if you just kill someone for the way that he had done in that story, that you're evil.
Yeah, and then there's a mention here for a situation where an NPC has a huge moral event horizon too suddenly, it can help to slow that story down.
Yes.
Yeah, it definitely can feel very whiplashy if it's just like if a character just does something suddenly in the story, whether it's a PC or an NPC. Having some build up to that makes it so much more satisfying.
That's right. Alright. Anything else on alignments? Any questions you all have on your biggest alignment snafus or questions or issues that come up for alignments in your games? We are here to field them if you have them. And if you don't, then we won't.
I also want to thank everyone in chat for being very respectful of each other.
Yes.
Because, as we said previously, this is a topic that can lead to all sorts of debates that are not always respectful. And it is a testament to our awesome community that the chat has been great this time.
Yeah, we did not shy away from some pretty provocative questions and statements, and you all are amazing.
So, how do you handle detect alignment spells in intrigue games?
How do you handle detect alignment spells in intrigue games? Well, they are uncommon, so you probably just don't want them to show up in an intrigue game. And if they do, then you should also introduce the uncommon spells that protect your alignment from being detected. Plus, non-detection is one that you want to cast in intrigue games, and is, if heightened, very, very powerful in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Do not underestimate the edge cases that make non-detection a little bit better than most other things. Because if you want to dispel something, or non-detection doesn't let other spells counteract it. It counteracts other spells, which means that it can be one level lower and still win, and it gets some other specific benefits in addition to that. So it's pretty good at stopping those kind of effects. If you're talking about summoning monsters to use an uncommon spell, then for one thing, in most social situations, summoning monsters is pretty sketchy. For a second thing, you might still be able to do it. It's an issue. It's an issue that we even thought of and brought up. We try to make summon creatures that don't really have that many uncommon spells. But when we were going through the bestiary, and I was like, well, all of these Celestials have this Detect Evil, and it's an uncommon spell, and we didn't have critical mass to not give it to them. So I would say just try not to abuse that. It's really short duration, too, so you would almost need to have someone tied down, and even then, if someone's evil alignment, that doesn't mean they're the villain, it just might mean they're selfish.
Yeah.
Remember, you might not even like hurting people if you're evil. You just might be willing to do so to enrich yourself.
Ular says, I'm dying to ask the obvious question for me. How would you suggest that evil champions utilize their codes to work with the party? Specifically, Desecrator and Anti-Paladin.
Alright, so we talked about the good champions, but let's talk about the evil champions for a bit. It was not fair to the tenets of evil. So
I don't need to be fair to the tenets of evil.
Just to make sure everyone knows, the top two tenets of evil are basically the first one is the opposite of the tenets of good, where you can't perform acts anathema to your deity or willingly commit a purely good act, such as giving something solely out of charity, casting a good spell, or using a good item. The second most important is to never put another person's needs before your own, and you must never put your own needs before those of your deity. Though you can perform acts others might consider helpful, it must be done with the expectation that it ultimately furthers your own goals or those of your master. So those are reasonably easy to get into your group, as long as you can come up with a way that your master's goals are furthered by whatever the group is doing,
and that your character always has an ulterior... It goes along with what the party wants, but always has some ulterior motive. For example, the ulterior motive of gaining wealth and power.
Yes.
Is an easy one.
So, Desecrator's next tenet, and only other tenet, is to subvert or corrupt everything in your path that is pure and good, and sow doubt among those upholding such ideals. Alethea, the chaotic evil character I described to everybody earlier in the show, who is all about helping people reach their dreams by just ignoring the consequences, absolutely could be this kind of Desecrator, even if it doesn't quite fit the idea that the Desecrator is super selfish, because Alethea feels herself as selfless. She is helping other people reach chaotic evil. It's such a nice thing to do. But you could absolutely have a character that all that you do when you subvert or corrupt, it's like you say, you try to tell people the selfish thing. When they're thinking of doing the selfless thing, it's like, or we could just leave. Right? Think about the advantages of that. If you just constantly are the voice for selfishness in your group, you're sowing doubt among those who uphold such ideas, and you're trying to subvert or corrupt them. That's all you have to do.
Yeah, and there's also the potential to have things that happen off screen, like when in Rise of the Runelords, when we had a cleric of Zon-Kuthon in the party, we out of character eventually found out about their secret Kuthite shrine in the basement where they did their Zon-Kuthon stuff. But in character, we didn't really know about the kinds of stuff that they were doing on the side. Or like when I had a character that was temporarily chaotic evil, she would go teleport to another nation where she would do things like sacrifice paladins and unicorns to her dark goddess.
That secret Kuthite guy was like the favorite of mothers in the small town where they lived, because of the fact that I asked him what spells he was preparing on an off day, and he was like, well, my secret shrine is very low and it's below the water level, it could flood. I'm going to prepare control water, just in case. I don't have any combat spells, just control water. And let's just say there was a situation where he saved the lives of many innocents with the control water that was attempted to keep his evil shrine from flooding. And everyone in the party was like, I can't believe you had control water prepared. That is the best thing. And it was
All
for a
these kids
completely
love
evil.
you
It was a
for
completely
saving them.
evil reason, but
Yeah.
it was really great. If we do if you vote for Mark's Adventures, Rise of the Rune Lords, we can see more about that. But hold on, let's go to the Anti-Paladin's Code. So Anti-Paladin does not have to subvert or corrupt things. Anti-Paladin has 2 additional tenets. You must not bind yourself with any law or oath beyond that of your code, and oath traits that oath trait feats you decide to add on to your code. You must act dishonorably, take advantage of others, lie, cheat, and steal to get what you want. So in that case, make sure you always cheat and give yourself an extra advantage in any situation. But it could be to make the party win. Because remember, the party we've decided already is going to be doing something that makes your god and their goals work. Right? We need that for the first 2 tenets.
You know,
So
also
in that
the,
case, when you take advantage of others and lie and cheat and steal to get what you want, it's actually helping the party. They may not be happy about how you helped them,
yes.
but you were helping them.
And they may be very amused out of character by your character's antics. If anytime, this would be a great opportunity for there to have a thing where the PCs are like, oh, you know, or players out of character like, oh, you know, well, there was some really great treasure there, but like we can't just take it because it belongs to those people.
Right.
And the anti-paladin just like may happen to come back later and take the
just
treasure
take it all.
and be like, I've acquired this treasure.
Or just not share it with
Or not share
other
it with
people if they don't want. If
or they don't want to.
they want to sleep soundly knowing that treasure is still with the people, that's fine.
Yeah, and then you know the anti-paladin has a more upgraded sword and it helps everybody.
Yep. And the last tenet, which remember is under the others, so you can always ignore it if the fact that the party is following your deity's things requires you to, right? Any of these. But you must destroy that which offends you and that which stands in your way, including and perhaps especially the forces of good and law that oppose you. Now, the forces of good and law in your party, we've decided, do not oppose you because you obviously need to play an anti-paladin who their deity and cause want them to do whatever the party is doing.
So
this
this
tenet
makes sense.
doesn't force you to take action immediately if it could mean your destruction, nor does it require you to destroy something that might be useful if corrupted towards your ends, like your party and what they're doing could be corrupted towards your ends. So you could pretty easily, as the main key thing, which we got to before we even went to the sub-tenets here, is to make absolutely sure that whatever is happening here is something that you can feel like your deity would go towards. And also
that
make
your
sure you're
character
very...
can profit from this.
And that you could profit. Be very transparent with your group. Like, for example, to avoiding anything but very vague spoilers for Extinction Curse, it's the AP where you're in a circus and then there's these weird MacGuffin things and there's a big giant threat to the island that you're on, right? So, if everyone in the group is okay with it, you could say, yeah, my anti-paladin wants to steal the MacGuffin things at the that are in this adventure for my evil deity. At the end, we may have a showdown, but up until we reach that point, I'm going to be with you every step of the way. If everyone's cool with that, because having a showdown is something that you definitely want to vet rather than just spring on people. Also, another thing you can do is have the GM leave the narrative uncertain at the end. It's like, well, we saved the day. Will Evilor make anti-paladin corrupt and steal these MacGuffins? Will what happens after the end of the campaign? I'll leave that to your imagination, or something like that.
Yeah.
And that way you don't even play out the conflict, and maybe people in their head come up with their own fanfic version of what that ending would be like, and it may be different for Evilor make anti-paladin than for everybody else. And that's super cool too. Whatever way that you're gonna handle that, you can. So let's see. Were there any other questions that were after that question?
I don't see any other questions there.
Okay.
So I think let's say goodbye to YouTube.
Let's say goodbye to YouTube. Bye, YouTube.
Bye.
See you next time.